For my daughter's 8th birthday, she got a small gift box from my parents. She smiled excited the way only an 8-year-old can be, but the moment she opened it, everything inside me cracked. She pointed at the thing lying in the tissue paper and asked, "What is this, Dad?" I looked at it and froze. My hands started shaking, not from anger, not from sadness, from recognition. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just quietly shut down. And the next morning my parents were calling non-stop as if they knew exactly what they'd done and were terrified I'd finally stopped pretending. Before I share my story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say listening in the comments or let me know where you are. I love hearing how far my story can reach. Sometimes even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And now, here's my story. My name is Benjamin Knox, and what I'm about to share isn't just a family story, it's the moment I realized love can break you long before it saves you. If my story resonates with you, I'd truly appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. It helps me keep sharing these moments, and honestly, it reminds me I'm not alone in this. I walked into the house that rainy Portland afternoon with my jacket still damp from the drizzle, shaking off the kind of cold that settles deeper than your skin. Leora's voice was the first thing I heard, bright, excited, completely untouched by the heaviness I carried. She was crouched at the front door, hugging a small, dented box to her chest, like she'd found buried treasure. I recognized the handwriting on the label instantly. My mother's cursive wasn't something you forgot, tilted, elegant, and always a little dramatic. I hadn't seen it in more than a year, but the moment my eyes landed on it, something in my stomach tightened. I didn't say anything. I just followed her into the kitchen, standing by the counter as she tore through the paper with that messy, joyful energy only kids her age possess. She peeled back the last layer and froze in place for half a second before holding the item up with both hands. A pink, old-fashioned dress neatly folded, the exact shade of rosewater my mother always favored. Leora twirled it once with a curious smile, then turned it around, confused. "What is this, Dad?" she asked, pointing at the embroidered words in white thread. I stepped closer, and the air left my chest. Little Rowan. My hands started shaking before my brain even processed the meaning. Not from anger, not from grief. From recognition so deep it hit like muscle memory. Because I had seen that dress before. Not this one, but one identical to it decades ago when my mother held it up proudly for my brother during a childhood performance that somehow became a full-blown family celebration. A dress meant for a boy she worshipped, a boy she elevated so high that the rest of us had to live in his shadow. I told Leora gently that she couldn't wear it. I didn't explain. I couldn't. I took the dress from her small hands, walked into my bedroom, and closed the door. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I stared at the soft pink fabric, letting the memories push up through the floorboards of my mind. I didn't cry. I didn't break down. I just sat there quietly, realizing that some lines, no matter how long you avoid them, will eventually snap. By the time the sun rose, I had barely slept. My phone buzzed with 7 missed calls from my mother, and just as I was about to put the phone down, another notification came in. "Benjamin, why would you do that? Call me back." I stared at the message, knowing exactly what it meant. The dress wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the first crack in a storm I'd been running from nearly my whole life. The unease from that dress clung to me long after the morning light filtered into the kitchen. From my perspective, it felt as if someone had reached backward into my past, grabbed a memory I had buried deep, and dragged it kicking and screaming into my present. I realized then that leaving Boise 12 years ago had never been enough. I had physically moved states, changed my life, built my own family, yet somehow the Knox version of gravity still pulled me back. Rowan had always been the center of the household, the sun every conversation orbited around, while I was expected to be the quiet, steady moon, visible only when needed, fading conveniently into the background when he stepped into the room. At dinner, my mother's first question was always some variation of "How was Rowan's day?" and mine was always, "Did you help your brother today?" I didn't have to be told I came second. It was implied so thoroughly that it became the air I breathed. I remembered my 6th birthday, in theory a milestone for a child. But that year, Rowan got accepted into the Golden Hoops youth team, and suddenly the day wasn't mine anymore. My mother even shushed me when I whispered, "It's my birthday." She told me not to be selfish, not to make the day about me. It was the first time I understood that some children are allowed to shine, and others are only allowed to reflect. As Rowan grew older, so did the illusion built around him. He was charismatic, effortlessly charming, always 5 seconds away from convincing someone to give him another chance. And everyone did, every time. Meanwhile, I watched the patterns form, his broken promises dismissed as quirks, his careless mistakes excused because Rowan's special, he just needs support. No one noticed that the more they let him float above consequences, the deeper I sank under the weight of picking up what he dropped. But the real twist didn't hit me until I was sitting there holding Leora's dress the night before. I remembered something I had spent years avoiding. My mother once kept a pink dress almost identical to this one. She had it made for a childhood event. Rowan participated in a performance she treated like a prophecy. Same shade, same collar, same tiny embroidered stars. And it hit me with a sharpness I wasn't ready for. The gift to Leora wasn't an accident. It wasn't even nostalgia. It was a recreation. A deliberate attempt to resurrect the golden child she lost. As that realization settled, a suffocating heaviness grew in my chest. The dress wasn't about Leora at all. It was a signal, a rewriting, a warning that my parents were trying to mold my daughter into the same image they'd spent her entire life holding on to. By the end of that memory, the room felt smaller, the past louder, and the truth unavoidable. I couldn't outrun this anymore. I couldn't keep pretending distance was protection. If I didn't confront them, this cycle would swallow my daughter the way it tried to swallow me. And for the first time in years, I knew I had to stop running. I stood over the trash bin in the garage, staring at the pink dress folded neatly on top of a pile of cardboard, as if it didn't belong anywhere else in my house. The longer I looked at it, the more I realized I had never told Leora who Rowan really was. Not the polished version my parents clung to, not the golden son everyone believed would change the family's future. And I had never told her the truth about what I carried because of him, the way my adult life had been shaped around the damage he left behind. When Rowan turned 22, he announced that he was launching a handcrafted product brand called Knoxcraft Atelier. He said it with the confidence of someone who expected applause, and of course my parents gave it to him. He showed us a sleek website with professionally lit photos of leather wallets and wood-carved ornaments. He claimed he had a team in Colorado, suppliers in Los Angeles, and pre-orders backed up for months. Even I wanted to believe him. For once it looked like he might finally be telling the truth. My mother told me that out of everyone in the family, I was the one stable enough to support Rowan through this exciting chapter. She said it the way people talk about fate, as if it was my duty written somewhere I'd signed without knowing. I sent him a few $100s at first, then more, then thousands. He said he needed funding to expand production to fulfill a big order to secure raw materials. Every request sounded almost reasonable when he said it, and each time my mother emphasized how proud the family would be once Rowan succeeded. Eventually, she asked me to stand in as the authorized person for some of Rowan's accounts, explaining that his business structure was complicated and needed a cleaner paper trail. I didn't question it. I should have. Months later, Rowan vanished. His phone went to voicemail. Emails bounced back. The Knoxcraft website disappeared overnight as if it had never existed. The only thing he left behind was a short message that arrived at 2 a.m. "I need time. Don't contact me." Everything else he left behind came to me. The credit cards he opened in my name. The debts attached to accounts I had never used. The loan applications he submitted with my information. I found out when the bank called about overdue payments I had never made. My credit score collapsed. Every attempt to apply for a mortgage was rejected. I took on 2 jobs to pay off the debt while still helping my parents, who were devastated and financially drained. They kept repeating how confused and heartbroken they were, how Rowan just needed space, how they hoped he'd come home soon. They never said sorry. They only asked when I could send the next payment. One night, after months of juggling bills, I sat down with every bank statement I had and compared them line by line. That was when I found it several transfers I thought were helping my parents with utilities had instead been redirected to an account belonging to Rowan. My mother had been quietly funneling money to him behind my back using the funds I sent her because she believed he just needed a little help to get back on his feet. That discovery felt like someone had kicked the floor out from under me. I wasn't just supporting my parents during their crisis. I was supporting Rowan again without knowing it, without consenting to it repeating the same pattern I thought I had escaped. Standing over the trash bin, now watching the pink dress slump slightly to one side, I finally understood why my body reacted the way it did when I first saw it. My parents had never let Rowan go. Not after the lies. Not after the debts. Not after he wrecked my finances and vanished. They were still holding space for him in ways they never held space for me. And now, with one embroidered name, they were preparing to pull Leora into the orbit I had spent my entire adulthood trying to leave. The weight of that realization settled deeper than anything I'd felt in years. I closed the bin slowly, knowing this wasn't just about a dress. It was a warning, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. The pink dress became a fault line in my mind, a thin crack running through everything I thought I had left behind. From my perspective, it was impossible to pretend it was just a mislabeled birthday gift. It was intentional. It was familiar. And the more I sat with that truth, the more I began noticing signs that had been there long before the box arrived on my doorstep. My mother's texts came first, messages laced with emotional pressure, half-accusations disguised as concern. Questions like, "Why did you react that way, and don't make a big deal out of something sentimental?" My father left a voicemail insisting the dress was just a sweet reminder of Rowan's childhood, as if invoking his name should soothe me instead of setting every nerve on edge. Listening to them, I realized they didn't see me as someone who had been harmed by Rowan's choices. They saw me as someone making unnecessary trouble. In their eyes, I wasn't the one wronged. I was the one overreacting. Something hot and sharp rose inside me, something I had suppressed for years. I had allowed them to cross boundaries so many times that they no longer recognized them as boundaries at all. They only recognized what they needed from me, and for years I had given it silently until giving became expected. A few days after the dress arrived, I received another package from Idaho. I opened it reluctantly. Inside was a worn leather basketball journal, the one Rowan used as a kid. My mother had kept it all these years. On the first page in her handwriting were the words, "For the child who will carry Rowan's light forward." I closed the notebook slowly, understanding now that the dress wasn't a mistake or a one-off gesture. It was part of something bigger, something deliberately designed. They weren't reminiscing about Rowan. They were trying to resurrect him. That evening, as I sat in the living room staring at the journal on the table, Leora climbed onto the couch beside me. She swung her legs and said casually, "Grandma said I remind her of someone in the family. She said I sparkle like he used to." My chest tightened. I asked gently what else Grandma had said. Leora told me about a video call I hadn't known happened where my mother asked if she wanted to take the same classes Rowan took: basketball camps, performance workshops, youth programs. My daughter didn't understand the meaning behind the comparison, but I did. They were already shaping her like clay. Later that night, Celine sat next to me in bed and admitted something she'd been holding back. My mother had been messaging her privately for months, offering suggestions about developing Leora's talents, subtly applying pressure, encouraging Celine to sign Leora up for activities Rowan once did. Celine said she hadn't told me sooner because she didn't want to upset me, but the recent messages crossed a line she couldn't ignore. Hearing that confirmed everything I feared. My parents weren't just reminiscing. They were rewriting. They were rebuilding Rowan, this time using my child as the blueprint. In that moment, something inside me solidified. I could see the pattern clearly, the way history was curving toward Leora, the same way it once curved around me. The difference was that I had spent my entire childhood learning to survive that orbit. I refused to let her step into it. By the end of that night, I understood that the pink dress wasn't the problem. It was the spark that exposed a decade-long fuse I had ignored. And if I didn't act soon, the damage that swallowed my family once would reach my daughter next. I wasn't going to let that happen. I spent the next morning moving through the house with a heaviness I couldn't shake. From my point of view, the realization that my parents had reached directly into Leora's life without my consent felt like being cornered. It wasn't just the dress anymore. It was everything underneath it. Every message, every comparison, every attempt to shape my daughter into someone she wasn't. I felt myself tightening, preparing for something I had avoided too long. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and started combing through years of financial history with a determination that came from equal parts anger and exhaustion. If I was going to cut them off, I needed to know exactly what had been happening behind my back. At first, the transactions looked normal: old grocery transfers, utility payments, the monthly support I sent because I thought they needed it. But the longer I looked, the more small inconsistencies appeared. Little transfers, odd amounts, and payment descriptions that didn't match anything I remembered approving. Several went to Idaho-based accounts I didn't recognize. My chest tightened. I clicked deeper into the details and realized these unknown recipients were disguised branches of accounts linked back to my parents. Except the final destination was never them. I leaned back, rubbed my face, and called Celine into the room. I needed confirmation. Or maybe I just needed someone to say I wasn't imagining things. She sat beside me and scanned the screen, her expression shifting as she recognized the amounts. She told me quietly that my mother had asked her more than once to cover small bills, saying, "Benjamin will reimburse you, dear." She had brushed it off as my mom being overbearing but harmless. Hearing that felt like a punch. I wasn't just supporting them. Through their hands, I had been supporting Rowan's fantasy long after he'd disappeared. Then came the final piece I didn't expect. A letter from the bank arrived that afternoon, one of those annual summaries they send out. In the bottom corner of one page was a name I hadn't seen formally printed in years: Rowan Knox. The charge was tied to a 4-year-old debt originating from Idaho. He had still been using my identity even while gone, even while I was scrambling to repair the damage he'd already done. I stared at the letter, feeling the familiar ache of betrayal spread across my ribs like bruises resurfacing. That evening, while I was still piecing everything together, my phone buzzed with a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it ring out, but something made me answer. The moment I heard the voice on the other end, smooth, casual, untouched by guilt, my breath stalled. Rowan. After 5 years of silence, he spoke like we had talked yesterday. No apology. No acknowledgement of what he'd done. He just said, "I heard you're not helping them anymore." The casual tone in his voice made my skin crawl. Then he added, "They're getting older, man. You're the stable one. Step up." As if my life existed solely to shoulder what he broke. As if I owed him anything. I don't know what I expected to feel when I heard his voice again, but what settled in my chest wasn't sadness. It was clarity. He mentioned things happening in Boise, little details only someone who'd been in regular contact would know. That's when the last piece dropped into place. My parents had never cut him off. They hadn't been blindsided like they pretended. They had stayed in touch all those years, quietly funneling him money while letting me believe I was helping them stay afloat. Without knowing it, I had been funding his disappearance. By the time the call ended, I felt colder than I ever had in my life. There was no room left for doubt. I had been used by the brother who drained me and by the parents who enabled him. I put the phone down, opened my banking apps, and with steady hands ended every recurring transfer, every bit of support that had tied me to Boise. This time I wasn't doing it out of anger. I was doing it because it was the only way to protect myself and my daughter from a cycle that should have broken long before now. I closed my laptop and sat in the dim light of the living room, exhaling slowly. For the first time, the rope binding me to that old version of my family finally loosened. And I knew there was no turning back. The following weekend, I was in the kitchen making coffee when a loud, forceful knocking shattered the quiet morning. Something in the rhythm of it made my stomach sink. I walked to the door, opened it halfway, and there they were, my parents standing on the porch like a confrontation waiting to happen. My mother held a bakery box in her hands, the kind she used to bring when she wanted to sweeten unpleasant conversations. My father stood behind her, jaw tight, shoulders square as if bracing for impact. In that moment, the air in my home shifted thick with tension. My mother stepped forward in a practiced way, as though showing up unannounced at my door was normal. She said they were there to talk, but her eyes carried the same urgency I used to see when Rowan got himself into trouble. It didn't take long for her to reveal the real reason they came. She launched into how Rowan was struggling and how the family needed to stand together. She said my decision to cut the support had created unnecessary pressure and that I was being unreasonable. The words rolled off her tongue with the same tone she used when I was a kid, the tone that insisted sacrifice was just my role in the family. Celine must have heard the raised voices because she emerged from the hallway a moment later. She stood beside me, calm but firm, and told my parents she wasn't comfortable with the messages they had been sending her. Messages I hadn't known existed. My mother instantly shifted her irritation toward Celine, accusing her of influencing me, insisting this change in behavior wasn't my real self. Hearing that made something inside me snap into place. My real self, the one she claimed to know, was someone who gave everything without question. That version of me no longer existed. I looked straight at my parents and asked about their relationship with Rowan during the years he was supposedly gone. My father's face tightened. My mother stumbled over her first few words before shifting into indignation. They accused me of twisting things, of misunderstanding what family loyalty meant. But beneath the defensive tone, their slip-ups revealed the truth: they had stayed in contact with Rowan the entire time. Not only that, but they had taken the money I sent them for bills, groceries, repairs, and handed it to him. Hearing that out loud made something inside me go still. All the late nights working extra shifts, all the sacrifices, all the times I thought I was helping my aging parents, I had really been keeping Rowan afloat. Even when he disappeared, even when he left me drowning in debt he caused, and now standing right in my doorway, they justified it by saying he needed it more and that I was doing fine. As if my stability existed solely to patch the holes Rowan punched through the family. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just stood there and let the truth settle between us like a final boundary they could no longer cross. Celine stepped closer, placing herself in the doorway, and told them softly but firmly that it was time for them to leave. She said it with such clarity that even my father didn't object. My mother opened her mouth like she wanted to say more, maybe to guilt me one last time. But whatever words she had disappeared when I didn't step aside or soften. She and my father walked back down the steps slowly, as if realizing something far bigger than an argument had just happened. I closed the door behind them and felt no guilt, no hesitation. Just a strange, heavy calm. The kind that comes when a storm finally breaks open, and you can see for the first time everything that was hiding in the darkness. I stood there for a long moment, understanding that this confrontation wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of unraveling a legacy that had shaped my entire life and now threatened to shape my daughter's. And I knew with absolute certainty that I wasn't going to let that happen. That night, after my parents stood on my porch demanding explanations and justifying choices that had hollowed out years of my life, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet, Celine asleep beside me, Leora curled up down the hall, but my mind replayed every word my parents said. Every excuse. Every denial. Every moment they revealed just how deep their loyalty to Rowan still ran. From my perspective, all the scattered pieces of the past began falling into place with a clarity I wished I never had to see. I had never been the stable son they admired. I had been the safety net, the bailout fund, the dependable backup plan keeping their image of Rowan alive. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was a lifelong pattern stretching from childhood all the way into my 30s. I had spent decades adjusting myself, absorbing the impact of Rowan's decisions, and convincing myself that silence was easier than confrontation. But something shifted in me after that morning. For the first time, I understood that staying quiet wasn't protecting anyone. It was destroying me, and now it was creeping toward my daughter. I knew I couldn't let that continue. I got out of bed, sat at my office desk, and began digging through every file I had: bank statements, emails, digital receipts, messages that I had archived and forgotten about. Hours passed. One by one, patterns emerged. Money I sent for electricity had been forwarded to Rowan's secondary account. Transfers labeled medical bills never went to hospitals. Monthly support I believed was helping my aging parents was being siphoned into Rowan's lifestyle. The numbers didn't lie. My mother had been sending him money every single month for years, even during the period she claimed they were devastated, confused, and heartbroken by his disappearance. Around dawn, my phone buzzed. A long message from Rowan lit up the screen. He blamed me for breaking the family rhythm, called me selfish, said I didn't understand loyalty. He sent a photo of the room he was living in back in Boise. My old room, the one he'd taken after returning home without telling me. Seeing that made something inside me go cold. He was living the same life he had before, protected and coddled in the same environment that enabled everything. Later that morning, while I was still processing what I had uncovered, Leora climbed into my lap and asked why I hadn't smiled lately, why Grandma didn't call her anymore. Hearing those questions broke something open in my chest. I realized that my pain wasn't staying contained, it was bleeding into her world. I had to choose: maintain the illusion of a functional family or finally cut ties to protect my daughter from becoming the next child shaped by the Knox cycle. When I walked to the mailbox that afternoon, a large envelope sat inside. It was from Idaho. Inside was my parents' property tax bill with a handwritten note asking me to help just this once. As I flipped through the papers, I found Rowan's signature on one of the forms he had signed as a responsible party for new debt tied to the property. That was when I knew they were gearing up to drag me back into the financial mess I had just escaped. I went back inside, opened every account I still had connected to them, and shut each one down. Auto payments, emergency transfers, shared savings, all of it. I deleted recurring reminders and created a new document titled Things That Belong to Me. The list was small at first, shockingly small, but honest. It was a start. When I finally told Celine I needed to drive to Boise for one last conversation, she didn't try to stop me. She simply placed her hand on mine and said she trusted that I knew what I had to do. And I did. This time, my decision didn't come from fear or anger. It came from a quiet understanding. I wasn't going there to fix anything. I was going to end something that had been slowly killing me. By the time I packed the car and set the meeting with my parents, a strange calm settled over me. There was no going back, and for the first time in my life, that didn't scare me. It felt like freedom. The drive to Boise felt heavier than any road I'd taken, each mile peeling back layers of memories I thought I had outrun. I recognized every curve of the highway, every worn-down sign, every stretch of empty land where Rowan and I used to argue in the back seat, while our parents pretended not to hear. Returning alone gave the trip an eerie weight, like I was traveling backward into a version of myself I no longer fit. I told myself this wasn't a pilgrimage. It was the last step toward reclaiming the life I wanted for my daughter and myself. The house looked exactly as I remembered: faded paint, a sagging fence, the porch steps that creaked under the slightest pressure. Walking inside felt like stepping into a preserved museum of old roles and expectations. My parents sat together in the living room, stiff-backed like they were preparing for a formal meeting. Rowan lounged in the chair that used to be mine when I was a kid, his leg dangling over the armrest, wearing the same cocky expression he'd always worn when he knew our parents were on his side. I didn't waste time. I placed the file folder on the coffee table and spread out everything I had brought: bank statements, email printouts, phone screenshots, highlighted transactions, copies of loan documents, and every piece of evidence that painted a picture they could no longer deny. My voice stayed steady as I laid out the truth: where my money had gone, how they'd hidden things from me, how Rowan had used my name, how the family lies had been reinforced over and over at my expense. My mother's first reaction was disbelief, then indignation. She blamed circumstances, said they had been overwhelmed, that they were trying to keep the family stable. My father didn't argue. He looked down at his hands and said quietly that they thought protecting Rowan meant protecting the family, that they didn't know how else to hold everything together. Listening to them didn't lessen the weight. It only clarified how warped the foundation of our family had always been. Rowan unsurprisingly tried to twist it all back onto me. He said I had agreed to stand in for his accounts, that I had always known what I was getting into, that I was overreacting because I'd never understood him. The way he spoke reminded me of every moment in childhood where he manipulated situations and walked away unscathed. I didn't argue. I simply slid forward, copies of the accounts opened without my signature. Then the email he had sent our mother saying Benjamin doesn't need to know about this. The room fell silent. Even Rowan's smug posture shifted. My parents' eyes darted between me and the papers, their denial dissolving into quiet shock. For the first time in my life, I didn't shrink. I told them clearly that I wasn't paying another cent for anything tied to the family. I told them Leora would not grow up under the weight of comparisons, expectations, or the rewriting of history they were trying to repeat. I said out loud what I had been carrying since childhood, that the devotion they poured into Rowan didn't just harm me. It kept him from ever becoming an adult. They hadn't protected him. They had trapped him. I stood up and told them this would be the last conversation about the past, that whatever relationship we had moving forward would only exist if they respected the boundaries I set. As I walked toward the door, Rowan let out a short laugh, the same dismissive sound he used to make when he thought I couldn't do anything without him. But I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. His laughter had no power over me anymore. Stepping out onto the porch, the air felt different, cold, but clean. As I closed the door behind me, a weight lifted, replaced by something close to relief. I wasn't abandoning my family. I was leaving behind a system that had failed all of us, especially me. And I knew with absolute certainty that I had saved Leora from inheriting the same story. When I finally returned to Portland, the house felt brighter than usual. Leora ran toward me, arms wide, yelling, "Dad, you're home." And in that moment, I understood something simple and undeniable. This was my family. The one built on love, not obligation. On honesty, not manipulation. I closed the door behind me and let that truth settle. The past wasn't undone, but it was finished. And for the first time, I felt free enough to start over without the shadows of Rowan, or the debts, emotional and financial, that once defined me. After everything that happened in Boise, the drive back to Portland felt different, lighter in a way I wasn't prepared for. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't revenge. It was the quiet understanding that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from the places that kept you small. Sitting behind the wheel, watching the miles roll past, I realized I wasn't heading home because I had left something behind. I was heading home because for the first time in my life, I finally knew where home truly was. When I stepped through the front door and felt Leora's arms wrap around me, something inside me settled. The past still existed, but it no longer defined me. I wasn't the forgotten son anymore, or the backup plan, or the financial safety net for someone who never learned to stand on his own. I was just a father, a husband, a man who finally chose his own life. And choosing myself didn't make me selfish, it made me whole. If there's anything I've learned through all of this, it's that family isn't just blood, it's the people who don't demand that you sacrifice pieces of yourself to be loved. It's the ones who see you, choose you, and grow with you. Cutting ties didn't erase my history, but it stopped the cycle. It protected my daughter. It gave me back the years I thought I had lost. And I know I'm not the only one who's had to make a choice like that. Before you go, I'd love to know you're here with me. If my story meant something to you or reminded you of your own past, say, listening from in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes the hardest stories to tell are the ones we all secretly share, and hearing from you reminds me that none of us are going through this alone. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about breaking cycles, finding strength, and rebuilding from the inside out, I hope you'll subscribe to the channel. Every new subscriber tells me that these words matter to someone out there, and that means more than you know. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And wherever you are, I hope you choose what brings you peace, even if it means walking away from everything you once called home.